We welcome all the people that are present at this panel. It's a great pleasure to be with you here today. I wish to thank, first of all the team of GLF that organized this panel with great efforts. And surely it'll be a properly structured work. And I wish to thank Isabel and Bruno that are here with us throughout this process, and to all our guests, men and women. My name is Eider de Lasta. I'm a financial analyst for the conservation and climate at CITAL. CITAL is a nonprofit organization found in Brazil. We wish to change the meaning of capital and to mobilize capital to have a socio-environmental impact, a positive one. In our finance agenda for conservation and climate, our main objective is to design and to analyze financial solutions which will unblock the necessary resources to be able to contribute positively to the agenda of climate, biodiversity, and all the human areas related to climate conservation and with the indigenous peoples and local communities. Also wish to thank the collaboration created amongst CITAL and GLF, of course, through all the different opportunities of professional development towards agriculture. We work to having incidents, the development of capabilities amongst youth, and these are people that might be interested in sustainable development of their own countries. And also, it's of a great pleasure to talk about agriculture specifically today because agriculture is the most important topic for the socio-environmental agenda, makes this an excellent opportunity. Now, from an ecological standpoint, agriculture is crucial because it has to do with the planet limits which we can observe today as human beings. These are limits which determine our human conditions and our existence on this planet. Hence, we can relate agriculture with the loss of soil, loss of biodiversity, the nitrogen cycles, the different climate changes, and specifically in the case of Brazil, all the agricultural sector on forests and land use, well, this is one of the main sectors in charge of deforestation and for the increase of greenhouse gas effect. And this, as a consequence, generates an important alert. Hence, we have to reconsider and rethink which are the interested parties involved in the sustainable agricultural process that have to have an incidence to have more sustainable practices in the future. Agriculture is important because it is precisely in the intersection of society and nature, because agriculture is in charge of all the production of food and of different resources that people utilize to guarantee life quality as well as to guarantee the economic factors. Hence, we need to take into account the importance of this context, of this scenario, because it is important to simultaneously work to analyze on the practices that convey benefits, which will allow the reduction of environment degradation and to increase production, which will benefit human beings from a social and cultural perspective, and which are the goods that we need to guarantee these conditions. But we also need to adapt to the new scenarios which are taking place because of climate change. Now, in this scenario, there's a fundamental component, which is financial. It's necessary to transform things, and this needs to be leveraged through financial solutions and mobilization orientation of financial resources, which will allow a structuring of this transformation. We know that at present there is a big gap concerning financing to comply with this demand up to 2030 in terms of biodiversity, on climate matters as well. And we also see that there is a reorientation of financial resources. Hence, it's very important to protect the rights of indigenous peoples, local communities, and mainly producers at a local level as well, and small farmers at a regional local level. These are the main topics at hand today. I shall now introduce our speakers, which will be talking about this topic. Ison Andrade dos Santos. He's an accountant. Also, he knows much concerning strategic management. He has over 15 years of experiences. He works with co-ops and root cooperations. He's a manager, market manager concerning the Canuto, Guaya, Ucuruza farmers. And with us, Gabriel Chavez. He's a technician on agricultural matters. He has over 19 years of experiences working on loans, technical aid, and services on rural management. He specialized in production at small scale level and different types of farming issues. And he's a rural manager and strengthening of communities. And Fabian Ceballo graduated in biological sciences. He handles conservation matters. He has 15 years of experience. He works with conservation projects of the bioma in the region called Cerrado in Brazil. He carries out internal audits and different programs in rural areas, and he's published his own books and didactic material on the environment and conservation matters. Fabiane is the executive director of the consortium Dejados das Aguas, and each and every one of them will be addressing sustainable practices and equitable ones on agriculture and on different types of agricultural financing. Let me remind you that this session will be open for Q&A from all the attendees. Hence, those of you that wish to send your questions, please jot them down in the chat. We shall read them after the session and during the presentation to be able to remark upon them. With no further ado, I wish to thank you for your presence and participation today. And I wish to begin with the first question. Let's remember that we are working in an international event. Hence, the reality in Brazil is quite different. There is great diversity in the country. We have to explain things a little bit better for others. I wish to ask you the following. How can your organization work? In other words, where are they located and the social reality, ecological reality of your organizations and within your context? I wish to ask Dairson to please respond to the first question and to address what his organization does. Hello, good morning to all of you. My name is Dailson. My organization is called Coopercook, and the organization was created in one of the most arid regions of Brazil. The levels of rainfall are the lowest in Brazil. We compare this much with the desert climate, and there is scarcity of water in our region. Now, under these circumstances and with this diversity, this is how our organization began, Coopercook. It's an organization that, according to us, and since the start, it was transmitted in schools that in the semi-arid climate, it's basically impossible to survive. And the only option that we would have would be migrating to larger cities, to urban centers in Brazil. We are not happy with this reality, and this has always been the dilemma of our organization concerning the semi-arid climate. We need equality, rights, access to services, and therefore we have created our organization based on 4 pillars. The first one was back in 1990, the struggle against food hunger, in other words. It's a constant problem, and we have to guarantee food for these people. And secondly, we have scarcity of water. It's a big challenge nonetheless, but back then it was even more serious, and it determined the survival of individuals, human beings. And thirdly, we have the coexistence with other regions. We wish, therefore, to fight drought, which delayed the development in that region. And fourthly, the protagonism of women. Our organization was created based on the protagonism of women. And amongst these 4 elements, we also combine things to create this cooperative. Our goal is to create rural development sustainable strategies, taking into advantage as much as possible the potential that we have in our region. And also the Caatinga. The Caatinga is a bioma type that we have in Brazil whose potential is quite high. Therefore, our election was to work with fruit that can be obtained in this biome, and we carried out learning procedures, educational projects, and the Cooper Cook, our organization, came about as part of this context, searching for responses for society. Now, why did we place the name of Caatinga in this biome as a priority? Well, because we found disadvantages. There is a great potential and great opportunities. Diversity is large in this biome, and therefore we focused on this at present. Our organization has over 285 members, and women represent over 70% of these members. And today we have presence practically throughout the country in Brazil. We have a large diversity of products that come from our biome, the Caatinga, and we have a focus on two fruits. One is the ingu, which is a fruit that originates in the Caatinga. And during the drought season in our region, we only have this single fruit. This is the only thing that can be seen in green. It stores much water, hence it resists drought during a prolonged period. And we also work with maracuya of the Caatinga, which is it's the passion fruit, note from the interpreter, in this region. And we produce different fruits through these fruits, sweets, for example, artisanal beer, for example. So we have been able to position these fruits in different markets in Brazil and in parts of the world as well. Now, our goal is to generate more income, more and more for the producing families and for the individuals that cooperate at Copercup. This is our organization, hence thank you so much for my participation. Thank you, Dairson. And thereafter, we will be more interested concerning the opportunities and challenges that you have faced at Caatinga. Dairson spoke about a region in the state of Bahia in Brazil. And now I wish to give the floor to Gabriel, who's also in the state of Bahia, but he is in another type of environment, which is quite different to the Caatinga. Could you talk about your organization? It's called Tabua.
Bom dia mais uma
Thank you.
vez. Bom, eu sou
Good
Gabriel,
morning.
represento aqui a Taboa Fortalecimento
My name is
Comunitário.
Gabriel.
Nós
I
estamos
wish to
situados
uh,
na cidade
present
de Uruçuca,
Tavoa,
no sul da
community
Bahia.
strengthening. We are located
Um
in
território litoral
Curuçuca, the
sul
city
do
which is
estado,
found in the southern part
conhecido
of
como
Bahia,
a
the
Costa do
state of
Cacau.
Bahia. It's in the southern
A
coast of
Taboa
our
nasceu em
state. It's known
2015,
as the coast
né,
of
com o
cocoa.
objetivo
Tavoa came about
de
in the year 2015,
cuidar
and our goal
do,
was to
das vocações
preserve
econômicas de uma
and
vila de
take care
pescadores, conhecida como
of
Serra Grande,
economic
no município de
activities of a
Uruçuca,
small
né?
fishers town, which is
E
known as the
a
Serra
ideia
Grande in
da
the
Taboa era
municipality of
fortalecer
Uruçuca. And the idea behind
comunidades
Taboa
através do
was
conhecimento,
to
do
strengthen
acesso
the communities through the exchange of knowledge,
financeiro e a
through
cooperação.
access to
E
funding,
em
and also through
2017,
cooperation.
essa instituição ela
Back in
começou a olhar
2017,
para a agricultura familiar,
our
né? Começou a ter
institution
contato
began
com os
analyzing what was
parceiros
taking
aqui da
place
região,
with family
e a gente
agriculture,
tem
small
uma
farmers. We had other allies in the region
um
which
grande
helped us
problema na
out
nossa região, que é que
because
parte do
we
processo de
faced a big
regulamentação
issue in our
fundiária
region. Now, this issue is that
desemboca
part of
na
the
questão de
regulatory
acesso a crédito.
procedures
Então, como a
and
Taboa ela
financing
nasceu
has
para
much
cuidar
to
de
do
questões
to
econômicas,
access to loans. At
ela foi um
Daboa,
projeto para
what
ser
we want is to
fomentada por
protect the
setores
economic
familiares e
activities, and
entidades da
therefore
região que
the
tinham noção de
farmers and
como
the activities in
resolver
the
um
region began
problema gargalo
promoting
muito
this
grande na
organization. They were
região da
searching for
cadeia produtiva,
solutions to
tendo
large
em vista que
hurdles
essa
that we
região,
identified in our region
até a década de
concerning the
80,
production
final da
of
década de
cocoa. We
80,
have to keep in mind
ela era
that until the
predominantemente
end of the
dominada pelo
80s
agronegócio,
decade, in
né, que
this
cuidava
region,
dos
we saw the
coronéis, que tinham
prevalence
fazendas de
of
cacau aqui na
farming,
região,
agriculture,
e com
and
a
we
chegada da
had
vassoura de bruxa,
what we call
esse
barons,
ambiente
people
ficou
in charge
bastante
of
árido para o
these
cultivo do
farming
cacau, e
methods.
onde vários
But
fazendeiros e
because of
coronéis na
climate
época
and environmental
vieram
changes,
a
the
abrir
weather
falência
became
dessas
very
fazendas,
arid,
e
and many
começou
owners
um grande processo de
that
reforma
followed
agrária na nossa
these
região,
practices
né?
ended up
População,
failing.
os
Hence,
trabalhadores
an
dessa
agricultural
fazenda
reform procedure began in
passarem
our
a ter
region.
familiares
So
nas
the
famílias,
workers,
a
the
seus próprios
farmers that worked
grupos,
with
a
these
sua
large
propriedade
barons
terra,
assumed their
tendo
own
ser
economic or took upon
protagonistas da
themselves
sua
these
própria
economic
renda
activities.
do seu
They
próprio
became the
negócio. Então, a
protagonists of the
Taboa
land and
começou
activities. Hence, they
a
have their own
procurar
income and
discutir
businesses.
como a Taboa
Thus,
podia
Tavoa
deixar
came
não
about
só
to
olhar
search
para o território de
precisely
Serra Grande, para aqueles
for
pescadores de 4.000
a
habitantes,
different
e
future,
olhar
a
para um
different perspective.
território
Not only did we want to
de
take
6
care of
municípios
4,000
da região Taboa
inhabitants of the small
e
fishers
complementar
town, but a
diversas
territory
famílias.
comprised of
Hoje a
26
Taboa
municipalities that produce
hoje
cocoa. So how
já
could we
em 60
obtain loans for
municípios,
these families?
desde todo o
At
território
present, Tavoa
sul da Bahia
carries out
até
activities in
o
60
território de Irecê,
municipalities
que é a
that
região
take into
semiárida do
account all
estado.
the southern part of Bahia up to the semi-arid region.
Muito obrigado, Gabriel, pela apresentação.
Excellent. Thank you kindly, Gabriel, for your presentation. I now wish to give the floor to Fabiane. He will be addressing the Cerrado das Águas project. We would like to understand why you chose this region in the Minas Gerais region. How is the project related to the history of your territory, and why did you decide to start that project there? Which were the challenges
Perfeito.
and
Primeiro, eu
identified
queria agradecer o
opportunities?
convite, né? É um prazer imenso estar
Fabiana
aqui falando
has
com
the floor.
vocês
First
sobre
of
esse
all, I wish to
assunto
thank you kindly for this
relevante.
invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here
Então, o
to talk
consórcio
about these
nasceu sobre
important
uma base muito
subject
sólida,
matters.
né?
Now,
Nós
this consortium
começamos,
came
as
about
primeiras
through a
discussões ali
sound
voltadas a esse
foundation.
momento, elas começaram no
Now, the
período de
first
2014.
talks
E o
where I was not
contexto
present
é desse Brasil,
began
né? Das
back in
águas, do Brasil
2014.
que
And
36% dos
our
empregos
context is
são
that
ali no
Brazil
agro,
is a
36%
country
das
of agricultural
exportações, né?
practices.
Em torno
36% of
de
employments have to do
25% do
with
PIB.
farming,
Então, naquele
exports
cenário,
over 30% of exports,
somado
of
esse
course,
cenário
concerning farming. 30% of GDP comes from farming
que
practices. Hence,
mundial,
it's a
por
scenario
outro
with
lado,
much
esse aquecimento
agricultural
global, né?
practices.
Então,
It generates
causando aí
many
perda,
jobs. And on the other hand, we
perdas
face
na
global
cifra de
warming
milhões
and
aí em
climate change, which has
relação a
caused
esses problemas
losses.
ambientais que
And
a
as a
gente está
matter of
vendo.
fact, these
Então,
losses
naquele
represent
momento, em
millions
2014,
at
foi
present. And these environmental issues
pela Nespresso
face or create
junto com a
issues.
gestão da
In
ECM,
2014,
estudo
I began
sobre
addressing these
análises de
issues,
riscos e
and
oportunidades,
through the office
principalmente
called
do setor
UCN,
aqui
they
na região do
started
Cerrado Mineiro,
analyzing, or they
né?
carried
A
out a
ideia
study
é
to analyze
entender que
opportunities
poderia ser feito
and
frente às
opportunities
mudanças
in
climáticas
Cerrado in Minas
para se
Gerais.
manter o café aqui nessa
So we
região.
wanted to
Nós,
know
como
what
a
could
gente
be
já tem
done
lá em
when
2004,
facing
né?
climate change
10 anos
for
antes
the production of
praticamente, um
coffee
estudo
in
da
the region.
Embrapa
Since
mostrando que
2004,
se
10 years
a
before, in
temperatura
Grapa, they
continua
carried out a
aumentando
study which
a todos
demonstrated
esses
that if temperature
planetas, o café
continues
realmente
to
vai
increase
migrar dessa região.
based on
Por essa
provisions, well,
história,
coffee
né?
will
Nós
not
temos
be
aí
produced no longer in the same
muito
manner
tempo para
in
essa
this
região.
region.
Nós temos
But
uma
it's been
história do
years of
café
history.
nessa região
We have a
que
denomination of
produtores
origin in our
raiz
coffee. We
que
have a long
trabalham
history.
nisso, né?
And
Nessa
there are
região
many
do
producers and
Cerrado Mineiro.
families that
E
depend
aí esses
on
conselheiros
these
eles
farming
mostrou então que a
methods
gente
of
tinha
coffee
vários
in Minas
desafios.
Gerais. In the study in
Perda de terras
2014, we
aráveis, né? A
demonstrated
gente
that
está
we
falando
faced many
perda de
challenges,
solo,
like, for
aumento
example,
da
the loss
infestação
of
de
lands,
pragas. Naquele momento, a
large
gente
production lands.
já
There
vem
were more
submetendo
pests back
movimentos
then
aí
because we
refletindo sobre o
saw
comportamento das doenças
the
no
first
café e as mudanças climáticas. Então,
movements
daí para saber, a
where
gente
we
estava
spoke
tendo
about
problemas
diseases
com
caused
infestação
by
de
these
pragas
types
ali por
of
causa das
pests. And
mudanças
we knew
climáticas.
that there
Então,
were
todo
many
esse
issues
contexto de
because of
mudanças
the
climáticas,
presence
da
of these pests and
importância,
climate
né,
change. Now,
desse,
within
desse
this
setor,
context
né, do
concerning
setor do
climate
café
change, and because
para
of
o
the
PIB do
importance
Brasil,
of this
para toda
coffee sector
essa história,
for the
levou,
GDP
né,
of
então,
Brazil and
a
everything
uma
that it
situação.
implies, well, all of
Como
this
fazer? Como a gente
made
pode
us reach the following. We
construir
have to
uma
think
solução para
on
isso?
how can we
E
build
então sai
right
desse projeto
solutions for
individual,
these
né? E
problems.
a Nespresso então lança isso
And
pro todo, né?
this
Então nós
became
temos ali
a
um
collective
agregado
project.
de
We
soluções, um
published the
agregado
results
de
of these
instituições,
studies, and therefore
órgãos
different
governamentais, ONGs. Nós
solutions
começamos a
were
discutir
proposed.
localmente então como
Different
fazer isso,
government
né? E isso
agencies,
começou a virar
NGOs began addressing
um
this topic at a
movimento
local level
em
on how to find
2014 para
solutions. And
2019,
this became
nós
a
discutimos
movement
sobre
since
isso,
2014 up to
como processo de
2019,
solução,
where we
poderia
spoke
ter
mainly
nós
about
indagamos
this
ações
topic, on
efetivas
how
no
to
passado,
implement
como
solutions.
programa de
And in
investimento no plano
2019, we
docente. E
officially
aqui nós
launched
descobrimos
the
que a grande
consortium
oportunidade
with
era
an
levar
investment
conhecimento
project
para as áreas
concerning
todas, né?
conscientious
Inicialmente da cadeia
projects.
produtiva,
The
né?
idea
E agora a
was to
gente já
work
está
together to
realizando
join
essas
strengths,
políticas, porque
forces,
nós
in
trabalhamos com
starting with the
indústria
production
celular,
chain of
que a
coffee, but
água ela
with
não
other
conhece
supply
fronteiras.
chains as
Então,
well, because
esse
we
trabalho
work
financeiro
with
geográfico que a
basins,
gente
water
desenvolve
basins.
é
Water has no
fundamental para essa
borders, hence
conquista.
the work
E
that
foi
we
daí
do
que surgiu o
with water
conceito,
and
então, né,
basins.
dessa
We also
necessidade
have found
de realmente
partners.
manter essas
So we
políticas
created
aqui
this
na nossa
consortium
região.
because of the need to maintain the culture that we have in our
Muito
region.
obrigado. Eu acho que as falas trouxeram para a gente tanto um
Thank you.
histórico da região, mas também já mostraram para a gente
You just
os
shared
desafios
the
que foram
history
colocados
of the region on top of
do seu próprio
specific
contexto.
challenges,
Eu
each
acho
one of
muito
them
interessante
located
saber,
within a
diante
specific
desses
context.
desafios,
So in the
quais
face of
foram
these
as
challenges,
soluções
it's
que
important
vocês
for us to
pensaram
better
e
understand the
como
solutions you
aterrizar
envisioned
a nossa discussão
with
central aqui,
special
como que
attention
políticas
to
financeiras ou uso de
our
incentivos econômicos
conversation today.
das organizações não
Financial aid
governativas
or
começaram a
economic
interagir com nossas
incentives,
ações
how
e poderiam
did
resolver
they start?
alguns dos
Or how were
problemas
they
históricos que
contemplated
vocês
as a
colocaram para a
solution
gente.
to sort
E eu
out
vou
the
pedir a mesma
issues you
dinâmica.
were
Vamos
facing?
começar com o Dailson?
And perhaps we can start with Dailson.
Podemos sim.
Let me
Na
see.
verdade,
Truth
essa questão
must be told
do apoio, do financiamento
that
para as atividades, ela ainda
support
é hoje
and
um desafio
funding
muito grande.
of
Por
activities is
estar
still
numa região
a major
que
challenge ahead.
toda a questão de capital, de crédito que foi montada no
As
Brasil,
per capital
tem um
loans
requisito
and
para
credits
conseguir
in Brazil,
determinadas
there
regiões. Um exemplo
are
prático. Você não pode
biases
achar
throughout the
um fundo
regions.
de
For
garantia de
instance,
crédito
you
numa
cannot
região
uh,
onde está boa,
use a
ela vai seguir um
guarantee
modelo onde
for
está
a
negativa.
specific
São
region, and you
vários
cannot believe that
pressupostos muito
the model
diferenciados.
that
E a gente
worked in
tem muitas
Taboaba
opções de
will work
crédito
in
financiando no
Lakatinga,
Brasil,
because
principalmente
those
para
models
pequenos
are
empresários,
completely different. And
que
within
vão
the
valorizar o que não
credit
favorece
policy in
quem
Brazil,
investe
namely
e é
for
muito
family
qualificado na
agriculture,
região.
we need to
Então a gente
standardize
se depara
whatever
com
lacks
esse
of a
setor
standard,
muito
because we're a diverse
muito
country and there are
sobre
major differences
como
between the regions.
financiar os empreendimentos,
So
as
we've
atividades
been
para os
encountering
novos negócios.
difficulties on how to
Então,
fund our
olhando para a
activities
questão
for a while,
sempre
because we
sobre
really want to
dificuldade,
extend our
sempre
capacities in
recorrer
our
aos fundos
businesses.
corporativos, que
This
hoje
has
está difícil
proven
de você
a
o próprio
significant difficulty in
autofinanciamento, a
Brazil because we
organização,
have
o prototipo, a
community
saca de uma sacola
loans and
R$ 50
self-funding
que hoje
mechanisms
ocupa
within the
R$
organization
a
where
gente
it's
financiava a própria
actually
atividade,
the
né? Algumas políticas governamentais de
we can
compras de
fund
estoque,
farmers
como
by
essa que teve no ano de
selling cattle
2023,
to
que
other
veio com
farmers,
um
for
acolhimento
instance.
como a Conab, que é uma empresa
And
pública que tem esse papel de estoque regulador e que ainda
we also need to deal
fiscaliza
with our
políticas de
inventory
compras de estoque de
because
cooperativas
we
agrícolas
have a
familiares. Ou
stock
seja,
standard
antecipava recursos
and we
para que
can
aquelas
buy
mais
from
famosas famílias
whatever the family
pudessem ter um
cooperatives
próprio
sell.
produto e
We
produzir.
used to
Então,
anticipate
essas
costs
políticas que
to
nós temos
expand our inventory
agora,
to
mas
start to sell
trazendo para o
and
quadro
to
desafio
grow
os
even
recursos
more. So
financeiros,
these are the
eles
difficulties we have
têm essa
encountered
dificuldade de se
because we
adaptar
do
como
have the
governo
financial
a
assets, but
ecossistemas
it's hard
diferenciados.
for them to
Essa coisa da
adapt their
padronização
models to
do
different
financiamento é o grande
ecosystems.
desafio. Ou seja, se você chegar hoje para uma cooperativa da
So
agricultura familiar
standardization
portuguesa,
of
que tem
funding
uma
is
grana
a
que não é
huge
real para comprar
challenge
sua
ahead.
saca giro no
Because of
mercado,
these types of
você está
difficulties,
querendo matar a pau,
we
entendeu? Ou seja,
know
aqui
that
o grande
there may
desafio
be
é
specific
tratar a
operations
questão
that will
ambiental. Nós somos um
render
biocossistema, então a questão
inoperative
ambiental não é
a
opção nossa, é uma
different
necessidade nossa. Se a
action.
gente não
And
preservar
it
uma
also
região,
has
vai
to do,
acabar
it has a link
sendo
with the
totalmente
environmental
destruída.
aspects,
Isso
with the
tem que haver uma
biome. If we do
preocupação
not
maior.
protect and not take
Veja,
care
Nova Iguaçu,
of the
cidade vizinha
biome, we
de
will no longer
Petrópolis, nós
exist. Remember, so
provavelmente
Aracatinga
a gente
needs to
enxerga
remain
que com todos esses desafios,
open
mas a janela para frente são
and
as cada vez
protect
mais
the
distantes,
biome.
né?
So with all these challenges, the window up ahead is
Perfeito,
increasingly
obrigado.
difficult.
Essas reflexões super importantes para
Thank you. You just brought up relevant topics that need to be contemplated. We need to analyze the funding, the diversification of environments throughout Brazil. This is just an expression of the many challenges to better understand the different contexts existing in Brazil, because you also face quantitative issues and the challenges. Gabriel, can you share a bit further on the financial challenges you need to address and how these challenges can be visualized in Taboa, so we can better understand what's going on with the communities? How did you engage in that dialogue? Well, there are similarities with Gabriel's presentation. The specificities of each region are important, and our main challenges were to first focus on productivity due to the lack of funding for our region. It took a dip in the number of hectares, and we had to overcome the process, and we needed to do so in a certain environment where loan management was actually a difficult process in the region, since the financial institutions didn't want to consider cacao as a passive source of funding. It doesn't necessarily revolve around funding, but operations in the field, in the ground. This is why the cacao region ended up not having access to the funds. That was a major challenge. And we see that this region has the cabruca cacao, which is endemic to this region. Cabruca entails a different way of planting cacao. It has existed in our region for many years. Remember that cacao contributes to diversity. It contributes to the greenness of our environment and to sustainable development. So the forests are wholesome and to assist the families, which is a challenge because the Kabuka cacao productivity is less than full-blown cacao. So the costs are lower and the impact on the environment is a bit more positive to continue with the efforts to assist the families. Therefore, it is convenient to open up credit lines for the families by properly observing the specificities and particularities. There are regional specificities, but we have gone deeper in this process to understand the essence of farmers, because these farmers are neighbors, but each person manages their property accordingly. So we cannot just bundle everything up and create a one-way solution, because that will increase the debt. Nonetheless, I love PRONAF, which is a credit line, but the PRONAF is the National Agriculture Program that grants credit lines for the families. Still, adjustments are required to personalize and to customize proposals to the farmer's needs. Of course, I cannot apply the same bundle to everybody and believe that everybody's problems will go away. PRONAF in the Bahia region is 70% of the region. So they started to work in a more personalized nature, assisting farmers with still a reduced portfolio compared to national credit lines, but still the credit line can reach zero rate because there are two common aspects. First, the technical follow-up, because without the technical follow-up, things will not work. And without that, things just don't work because you can't dream things will work without having the financial resources to sort them out. Excellent, Gabriel. Thank you so much for your contribution. Now, Fabiani, what are the challenges ahead and what's going on with the credit, economic incentives? How to contemplate this perspective for your projects? Well, I believe that our bias is slightly different. Just last week, our credit line was launched. It started out due to farmers' demand. But when the 2019 consortia was created, it also came through with a collaborative platform. Back in 2019, there were several ideas. As a matter of fact, we had started earlier with environmental services because our main focus was water and to keep water underground, to keep it in the soil. So in order to do so, we knew we had to build a landscape. We had to observe the soil, the vegetation, the surroundings. How? Well, that was our main question. In 2019, we understood that the format of a collaborative platform could assist the coffee growing area and that we could also review how goals were met. Back then, the business sector was supportive, and there are 12 companies currently assisting with the water management services, and decisions are made jointly with the allies for investment purposes and to assist growers. Our investment program is called PPK, and it aids growers in their activities. This program was built jointly during the research process with the farmers because we had contemplated performing and engaging in different activities, but we got in touch with the growers and they told us exactly what they needed. They claimed they needed guidance, they needed to understand a way to preserve the ecosystem and to prevent plagues from invading and from becoming a problem. We needed to know how to defend ourselves, and we designed the program based upon those needs. So we started working with that program for the river basins. So we assist our growers in everything regarding the basins. But back in 2019, we detected another need. We detected that the support given to growers was not enough, that we should invest in the first years. And as a matter of fact, we did buy the seeds, we bought land, we helped them and contributed with the small growers, with the small farmers. At if we see things at the large scale and we may believe they have everything, but we were capable of detecting what they were missing out, and we created techniques to assist them. So we discussed for over 2 years with several institutions, and we have now launched our funding line for rivers, and small growers can start out a transition process to implement strategies that will help preserve the soil, to plant more trees in the region, to adopt strategies using more biological products versus highly polluting we wanted to give the conditions to for adaptation processes, right? Our vision is a bit more practical, but there's also a need for funding, right? As Gabriel mentioned, this is very important because we need to be mindful of the growers' needs because they are individual needs. We need to understand the specific needs of each farmer, especially in amid the river basin. Thank you for your comments. You all touched upon very sensitive topics that need to be thoroughly analyzed. You shared your perspectives on the landscape, and we get to see the amplitude. We should see the full picture always, right? Where there's a relation between nature and society, which also leads us to thinking things from the collaborative perspective. Now, Fabian, I wanted to specifically understand how you visualize the procedures used in Cerrado das Águas from the action perspective. That is to say, your actions with the authors, because you are aiding the farmers on business techniques and growing techniques. We knew that when we analyzed the requirements, that we knew that it would become increasingly difficult to approach to those companies. Well, Heitor, I believe that we must remember that we're currently going through strong climate events. The average temperatures are extremely high. In the past, the average used to be 17, 18 degrees Celsius, but the temperatures are extremely high today. If we see what happened back in 2021 in the region, the coffee plantations took a toll. We had detected an issue in our radar of operations because we knew there were issues for agricultural businesses, hence the importance of watching the trends. And it's clear for us in the consortium, we need to address the private sector demand and the need of growers because businesses depend on nature. We know this and it is clear. So as per the plans, our focus are first the landscape, the surroundings, and these are all nature-based solutions to serve nature, to keep lands in the soil. But these solutions are provided by nature and their priorities too. This is why we're opening up the dialogue. It's all about bringing this to society and to producers. There's no dichotomy between water and the environment, right? They come together, they cannot be separated. So we need to understand that nature has its own balance and dynamic. We need to be respectful of the balance. We need to continue to grow, but in respect of nature, not acting against it, which is the basic principle. These strategies will have an impact on the water production chain. The water production is highly impacted, and we believe that production can be maintained throughout the region. So we're talking about a preservation agenda, right? So in our consortium, we believe that we're not part of it, but we're actually leading a different type of business because we invest and we assist in business preservation. There's a long coffee tradition in the region, and that's the solid grounds of this consortium that we continue to build together. And so, because we need to analyze for how long are we going to maintain our business? You know, the growers, the private sector, everybody who's involved in the process. For us, this is actually a change of mindset among the business sector and the growers. That's the preservation agenda. Uh, We follow this premise. The preservation needs to go in alignment with the dynamic of nature and what we need. So we know that nature is our partner. That's what we've heard, and that's our conservation agenda, that nature becomes our partner, that we are allies of nature, that we preserve. And we need to walk together. We need to move forward together. Thank you, Fabienne, for your answer. And that's about it, that nature becomes our partner. It is one of the most important things because we are not only providing for specific circumstances, but water will affect climate condition as a whole. So it is important to understand these dynamics of nature. You mentioned the dynamic of Cerrado das Águas and the financial support, right? But there are other types of support as well, you know, articulations and extensive mechanisms. So I would like to go back to Gabriel to better understand your credit and loan dynamics, because we also need to see other forms of alliance and other dialogue mechanisms with rural producers. How are you able to handle this within your organizations? Who are your main allies in the private sector or in other sectors that took part? What can you say about the collaborative space? How did things evolve from your perspective?
Vamos lá.
Gabriel.
Bom, à medida que os problemas vão sendo
Of course.
solucionados, os desafios eles vão crescendo, né? Eles vão aumentando ainda mais. Então,
As issues are solved, the challenges
uma
increase.
solução inicial de piloto
So we
que foi
found an initial
a
pilot
execução de uma
solution,
carteira de crédito de R$ 1 milhão que contemplou
and the
145
loan
famílias.
portfolio was 1 million reais for 145
De uma
families.
forma que estruturada por várias mãos. A gente teve a Taboa como executora
We did it through Taboa, who was the loan executor who engaged in the dialogue with the farmers. Gaia Group, an insurance company that created an instrument called agribusiness certificates specifically for the Atlantic forests. The farmers took part of the construction process by undertaking social and environmental responsibilities, not implementing a plantation in permanent conservation areas or in reservations, not produce, not to hire child labor, prevent fires, and tree cutting. Gaia assisted us in that, and the network was significantly important. Agroecologia is an organization congregating 1,200 farmers as part of the network. So within the context, we implemented a credit line for 150 farmers that's currently operating. We implemented the credit line. We built a team of rural assistants, a credit team, as well as another one who was analyzing the benefits of this product. That is to say that they were checking how cacao could turn into cacao almond, and after that into chocolate. So it's from the seed to chocolate production, full circle. Now, in order to broaden the portfolio, we needed to find yet another partner in a consortium encompassing 15 municipalities. When it comes to loan granting, the most difficult aspect is technical assistance in the rural area and technical follow-up, which is a key task for those implementing credits, and you cannot leave that aside at all. Still, this is a very expensive task because technical follow-up is expensive too. So we created a consortium with the municipalities to implement technical follow-up alongside the municipal agricultural board. Taboa is a part of it with the credit proposal. So the alliance between Taboa and the loan with technical follow-up created a pretty interesting design. As a matter of fact, there are two more consortia, each one of them with 20 municipalities, and they're also using the credit instrument to develop jointly with the rest of the consortia. These instruments have worked properly. We have managed to overcome the technical surveillance process in the field, which is very expensive, as well as logistics on top of the technical labor, which is very expensive for the growers. So public participation is also required. Thank you, Gabriel. This work implies the joint efforts of different organizations and hands, right? So I would like to know what's going on with the allies. Do you have more guidance or further support, perhaps, so those challenges are overcome and to address the new challenges ahead, as Gabriel mentioned too? Well, Coop is a cooperative, and as Gabriel mentioned, we've seen the importance of technical assistance. We know that differentiation matters too. So on top of working with commercialization, we're working in partnership with technical services providers. We assist the traditional communities. We observe the impact and the way the different communities throughout the region live. We provide services through public resources. We have partnered up with the government of Bahia. We provide services to over 10,000 families, and our approach are economic fulfillment and ecology. We're 100% open to the production philosophy. We therefore have created alliances. There's one with Occitane. Occitane is a cosmetics brand. We are their providers. They're
alternativa para além da agroindústria.
And we do that in order to assist the growers, specifically pertaining loans. I cannot speak of many success stories due to what I just mentioned because there's scarcity to loan access. So we still have the traditional loan offer that we keep in the northeast of Brazil, and the Bank of Brazil, as well as Caixa, are. We know that we need to also check the conservation area. How are we going to fund the collective area? First of all, individual articulation is required, but this is collective, right? It is important to remember this for communities and remember that there is scarcity of access to credit due to these issues. So we're working with Occitane. We developed a project called Area Katinga, where we tried to rekindle the process through certification with state resources and a system that funds the areas in alliance with a German buyer, a German company who purchases our product. So whatever they buy, they give it back in terms of value so we can continue protecting Akatinga because our story basically revolves around scarcity. Excellent. Thank you very much, Yailson, for contributing with your experience. And I believe both answers were extremely interesting because you just addressed many of the questions in the chat where we're trying to understand the perspective of vulnerable producers to better understand the existing funding mechanisms to narrow down the gaps. So there's a significant reinforcement, and now everybody wishes to contribute to addressing the challenges, but different paths or alternatives are also being sought, as Gabriel just described and as Ailson just mentioned too. Great. Next, I would like to better understand based on the initial context, because you talked about the history throughout the regions, you talked about the challenges, you talked about what each one of your organizations are doing through different projects. So if we take a retrospective look and compare it to the current scenario, I would love that you address the already achieved results and based on the outcomes you have not yet completed, what are the challenges you continue to face? Let's start with Dail, so let's go the other way around. Well, as per the results, we tend to compare ourselves to the 90s because throughout the region, the fruit was in boom and this fruit was not fully appreciated. It didn't have any value in Lakatinga, but we can establish a clear comparison between 1994 and the year 2000. The 50-kilo harvest price was just 3 reals, but they currently have to pay 65 reals for the same amount. So we went from 3 to 65 reals in a short period of time.
The result is an increase in economic activities for farmers. There was an empowerment of women in the sector because this was possible because of the strength of women. We believe in their strength. And as a matter of fact, women believe firmly for things to take place. As a matter of fact, when we speak about the rights of women, feminism, and so on and so forth, this is an update. It's It's not something common at present, but back in the 90s, with the macho culture that existed, well, this is another period completely. And there is a common statement in our organization. We say that we are the result of coexistence amongst every one of us. We are the history of this coexistence because it's thanks to this factor that we're able to obtain results. And these are the most important results that we have presented.
Excelente, Dailson, muito obrigado. E Gabriel, lá da
Thank you,
Taboa,
Dyson.
Taboa,
Very
vocês
kind.
têm
Gabriel, what about you
propósito
at
de
Tavoa?
comparar os cenários das realidades
How can we
tecnológicas do século
compare
passado e hoje,
between the
para
social and
historicamente vocês não tiveram
ecological reality of the past with the path that we have undergone until now?
Parecido com a realidade do Adailton, da Dailson,
As a matter of fact, it's similar
a região
to
de
Daírson's
Cacau,
reality
por
because
conta desse
our region,
processo da vassoura de
the
bucho na
cocoa
década de
region,
80, final da década de 80
and
até a década de
because
90,
of this process that took
aconteceu
place back in
processo
the
de êxodo rural
80s
muito
up to
grande,
the 90s,
né? E
there
o
was
campo tem se
a
tornado,
rural exodus, a very large one.
tornou-se
People left
envelhecido
these
e
rural
muito uma
regions.
figura do
And as a
homem
matter of fact,
dominando o
you know, the
campo.
field
Os
or the
jovens e
lands
mulheres,
became
eles migraram
obsolete.
para as
So now
cidades,
we have
para as
this idea
periferias
of men in the
e
fields, but
acabando
youth and women
esvaziando
went
o campo.
towards the city or
Com
left towards the cities. And
esse
this
olhar de
emptied
implementação de uma
these rural
assistência técnica
areas that we spoke about
em
before,
extensão
but with
rural
the
mais adequada,
implementation
em
of
olhar
technical
todo
aids
o contexto
and
das
an
famílias,
increase
a gente
of
tem
rural
observado
lands and
algumas
with a
práticas
concern
de
of the
que, por
families, we have
exemplo, uma
implemented
delas é
different
que
practices.
nós sempre produzimos cacau, mas sempre
And
produz cacau
amongst
não como
these, we have the
chocolate,
production of
não
cocoa,
como
but the
bebida alcoólica.
production of
Hoje
cocoa
em
does
nossa
not mean
região,
a consumption of chocolate
nós
for those
saímos
that produce
no
those
meados
that
da
produce
década de
chocolate or produce
2025
cocoa did not eat
até
chocolate. It
agora,
wasn't
nós
possible. But
estamos
if we
na
analyze
região aqui,
the
quase
year
200
2005, this last
fábricas hoje,
decade, up to now in a
204
region at present, there are
hoje
almost
familiares que implementaram as
200
suas unidades de produção
farmers,
de
factories,
chocolate
family
da uva
farmers
que eles
that were
mesmos produzem,
able
né? O cacau
to integrate the
da
production of
planta à barra
chocolate
de chocolate.
by
Então,
means of the
esse
cocoa
processo
that they
de
harvest. In other
olhar
words, out of the
como a
plant
agregação de
up
valor
to
das
the chocolate
atividades
bars.
produtivas
So this adds
utilizadas,
value to the
isso tem
productive
trazido as famílias
activities
de
of
volta para o
this
campo.
population.
Uma outra alternativa que a
And
gente tem
this
utilizado
makes the
é
families to
entendendo a
return
agricultura
to their
familiar,
rural lands.
inserindo a mulher
And
e o
another result
jovem
that
no
we have
campo,
been
que
able
é
to
o
see
processo de
because of the insertion of
tecnificação do
women and
campo.
youth in the
Nós
land
temos,
is
por
the
exemplo, um
process of an
instrumento
increase in technology that
de
has taken
cultivo de
place.
cacau,
For
vocês não vão
example, there
conhecer,
is a
que é
tool
conhecido como
for the culture of
bisco,
cocoa. Maybe you do
que
not
foi
know it,
tão
but it's called
improvisado
bisco. This
para
is how we
limpeza
call it.
das
It's
áreas de
like
cacau.
an improvised
Esse
knife to
instrumento ele
clean
tirava o
out the
agricultor do
land, the
campo
agricultural land
muito
where cocoa is
rápido. O
being produced.
agricultor ele
And this
saía,
tool
ele já não ele entrava em condição
allowed
de não ter
the
mais condição de
farmers to
trabalhar
be
antes
able
de
to
ter
leave
5
the
anos de idade.
agricultural land very
E
quickly.
com o processo
And
de
they couldn't
melhorar a
work when, for
tecnologia
example, they
do
were
campo, de
55
você
years of age or
criar
more or less
melhores
that
instrumentos
age.
que
But because
financiassem
technology has
melhor
improved
instrumentos
in the
mais
land
adequados
and
para
there
o
are
cultivo do
different
campo,
loan lines for the
trazindo a
funding
agricultura
of more
familiar no
sophisticated
contexto
tools
geral para
to
dentro do campo de novo.
plant
Uma outra
these
atividade que
types
tem
of crops,
buscado a geração de renda nossa
well, more
hoje
people
é a
can participate in
meliponicultura,
these
é a
activities.
atividade de criar abelhas nativas sem ferrão.
Another method
Então, as
is that
mulheres
of
e jovens
utilizing
têm olhado
bees
e nós temos hoje um projeto piloto
with
com a chamada
no
Uruçu, que é a
danger
captura. Uruçu é
whatsoever.
uma
There
abelha
is
nativa
a
da
pilot
nossa região.
project. It's called Uruçu. It's
E hoje nós temos um trabalho
a bee
com
species
100
native to
famílias,
our region. And
prioritariamente
we
mulheres
have
e
carried out a
jovens,
project
cuidando
with 100
dessas
families.
abelhas
As a
e
matter of fact,
criando
the women and youth have
práticas que
priority. They take
sejam
care.
uma
They
geradora de renda
cultivate these
para essas
bees
famílias,
for
né?
these
Processo de
bees to
produção
be
de
able
abelhas
to
nativas sem
generate
ferrão,
a revenue
que
for
é
the
um projeto
families and
bastante
for the
requisitado
production
no
of
Brasil aqui,
honeybee
tem tido
of
uma abertura de
this
mercado muito
species,
grande.
which are
Então, as
quite
famílias têm
requested in
olhado para esse
Brazil. And as a
caminho
matter of fact, a
como
large market has begun
atividade de
for these
complementação de
products. And
renda,
this has been
tendo em
attractive
vista
for
que a
these families, and they
monocultura
have been able
ela
to
já nos
complement their
levou para
revenue, their
casos como
income. And we
esse,
also need to
final
take
da
into
década de
account that
80
monoculture
e
has
toda a
made
década de
us fail
90,
previously. This back in the decade of the 80s and 90s, we only harvested cocoa. It was a monoculture. But we have to promote the diversification of these crops for families to obtain greater benefits. We cannot place our eggs in one single basket because if it drops, all eggs break. Hence, we shall have no option whatsoever. Thus, this process made us to search for families that had more or less 800 reales as income. And the next year, through this process of adding value and through new products, their income is of 2,500 reales. It went from 800 to 2,500 in reales monthly. And this means, contribution of these alternative crops for them to leave poverty circumstances. Fantastic, Gabriel. These are very interesting experiences. And I now wish to give the floor to Fabiane. I wish to understand the current circumstances for all the people and for the environment as well, where the Sena dos Águas consortium works. Our main objective is to improve the supply of water resources for soil usage, for climate change purposes, for the amount of land that's available for this use. And these results will reach us in the long term. We do know that we're not able to change these circumstances of scarcity, to convert water form quickly. The hydrographic basins are similar to the human body because water is like the blood in a human body. It reflects the health situation of a body. So in our case, water reflects the health circumstances of the basin as well as the blood in a human body. Now, with regards to results in the long term, we have an investment program for conscientious farmers. Its function is not only to increase or to extend this program to implement strategies. Not only are they the executors, but rather they're the facilitators of the complete process. We wish to change the paradigms towards new strategies. We call these strategies as intelligent ones for climate purposes. In that way, we will be able to change the scene to improve land quality, to improve the existing conditions in these locations, and for water not to disappear, for example, with heavy rainfall when this takes place. And we are aware that this goal is difficult to achieve because it's for the long term, and we're working hard on this objective. But the development of this program concerning the investment of aware producers with the scale technology does not allow us to work in an isolated fashion. We need to work together. Like, for example, those lands or properties that are near each other for transformation to take place in a real manner. I believe that we have obtained positive results and the future perspective is quite good as well. We have 3 hydrographic basins where we work, and together these 3 basins are in charge of the provision of almost 250,000 people in where they're located. Now, this region where we are found, we see different issues that take place. Hence, it's urgent to develop this project that began in 2019. It has to grow because there is conflict regarding water scarcity. There are many municipalities that suffer because of a lack of water. At present, we are able to reach 1,500 hectares. We do not call them restored or recovered areas with intelligent farming because we know that this is a long procedure. But we are transitioning to achieve this intelligent farming with regards to climate that includes native vegetation. And we feel very proud to say that last year we began with a project requested from the farming communities. They told us that they wanted to know how to implement an agroforest. In other words, how can I harvest? How can I create a production system with shade In other words, this is something novel to our region. These are new techniques, much innovation. So this is the demand at present. We also have a funding strategy which stimulates these farmers, small-scale farmers, and we want this to be the foundation for new financial systems and to be able to create greater opportunities. At present, we have 33 properties. As a matter of fact, there are 106 which are adding themselves to Tepic, and we practice in these locations the activities that have been implemented. And that is where we help the different farmers that produce. There are many regions, and as a matter of fact, this is composed of 55 municipalities. We began in 2019, but we are very glad to be able to address these results because this shows that we're able to do things differently, and this is possible. Excellent, Fabiane. Gabriel Dairson, thank you kindly for your participation, and thank you for your enthusiasm. We could definitely continue talking for a further hour, and this shows the great diversity in our country because there are different scenarios where we were able to look at the different challenges. We know that things are extremely complex because there are many changes related to weather, to climate, the biodiversity agenda. There are social challenges also related to each one of the regions and the projects. And we also know that there is a large impact, but the most vulnerable locations receive the biggest impacts. And we also heard about very enriching experiences that show that there is not one single solution. The most important thing is to understand the importance of these partnerships and to bet on diversity because there is a big diversity of resources besides biodiversity and solutions. There are different origins where capital can come from, teamwork, articulation. In other words, it's very important to understand that there's great potential in diversity, and this is how we wish to close this panel. And thank you kindly for your participation, and hopefully we shall dialogue in the future with all of you. We will hold a further panel in this event. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.